Pharmaceutical Processing, in conjunction with INTERPHEX, presents INTERPHEX Live.
Good afternoon. All right, for our first session today, we're going to be talking about the innovative approach to cell and gene therapy facility design. Just to keep up with the topic, this is our second topic up, so check what I've been giving some advice before we get rolling. Check the INTERPHEX Live sequence, because we got two more coming up, okay? And we have another oncology discussion later today on oral therapy. So that was kind of our theme this year, just as an aside. All right, so we have Maik Jornitz from GCON with us today, as well as Tom Piombino from IPS. And what we're going to be talking about, like I said, is cell gene therapy facility design. All right, let's start off with specific needs for cell and gene therapy facilities. Let's start with that. Maik, you want to take a shot at that one?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about cell and gene therapy facilities, we talk about small volumes, and often right now it's still in some instances open processes. So containment is of utmost importance. We're talking patient by patient volumes. We don't want to have any contamination happening. We don't want to have any excursion happening, because we don't have a recoverable product. It's a patient product, therefore it needs to be contained within a very robust containment system. That's one part. The other part, what we see is in cell and gene therapy, is capacity. We don't know what kind of capacity we require, what kind of expansion we require within sites. So when we actually bring in cell and gene therapy clean room infrastructures, we are building first small scale systems. Virtually our clients test the waters with the material which they produce within these clean rooms, and then they rapidly start expanding the patient base. With that, they actually have to scale out their clean room infrastructure, and when they scale out their clean room infrastructure, they cannot disrupt the existing processes. So again, containment and segregation plays a role there, which means your air handling system cannot be interconnected. It has to be individual units which have their own air handling system, so you scale out without interrupting your existing processes. So these are, I would say, are key elements. And then there are some side benefits when it comes to cell and gene therapy. When you go into patient by patient systems, in a not centralized system, but in a more decentralized system. So what we see is the movements into bringing these units into a hospital-based level, where you typically build one large site. This large site distributes any drug product globally or nationally. We see that in cell and gene therapy, we get the trend into a hospital-based level. And that's in North America as well as in Europe.
There's some unique stuff, when we're looking at cell and gene therapy, and I think, Tom, what we were looking at, and we got into that this morning, was that when a company decides that this is the sector they want to work in, obviously there's got to be something that drives them in that. What are the top key things that drives them into that area? I mean, considering, do they know enough? I mean,
Well, I think they're caught between lab scale activities and
Yeah.
commercial manufacturing, so they're in a tight spot, because right now the FDA is granting a lot of breakthrough status, and it catches operating companies, new companies, in a pinch, because they've got a window of opportunity to get to clinical scale material. And so I think they're looking for speed, they're looking for flexibility. And I think that ultimately they're looking for some interpretation of the regulatory landscape, and we're falling back on aseptic most of the time, which we really need better information to go to, because they're coming from a lab where they're doing everything in a biosafety cabinet, which has got a lot of risk to it. We need an intermediate solution, and they're coming to folks like us to try to figure out what is that intermediate solution between aseptic and biosafety cabinet manipulations.
Well, I like that comment, because one of the things that we got into earlier this morning was they come into it with a lab mentality. So to me, I mean, they're going to come to, from a designer's standpoint, I mean, how do you deal with that? How do you accommodate that in today's market? I mean, it's a lab mentality. I'm used to working in between modular construction, how do you, as a project manager, how do you wrestle that to the ground to get these guys into a commercial situation?
Well, I think the business is booming. So you've got another challenge, which is trying to find the right people to consult with. You've got hundreds of emerging companies in cell and gene therapy right now, and they all need resources, and they're coming from the lab scale. So for us, we really just try to interactively plan with them and show them what's the spectrum of regulations that they have to sort of select, and then we do risk assessments to try to get them in the right zone for them. And that might be a cost thing, it might be a risk thing, it might be a short-term interim need where they're looking to be bought or partner with a larger company. But it's not an easy conundrum.
I mean, Mike, so I mean, to me, because I think a lot of us come at this with the old NCE mentality. I think that's where talking with a couple of groups here, I think a lot of companies are driven by it's like it's a new chemical entity. I'm going to go after. I mean, and they don't give any consideration to facility design. They don't give any consideration to their current applications that they have to do. I mean, bottom line is, how does this differ than somebody coming to you and say, okay, I want to go with a chemical entity as opposed to a cell and gene therapy? And see what I mean? In other words,
Yeah. So I mean, ultimately, right now we're talking about a new wave of therapies, right? We had exactly the same situation when we moved from small molecules to large molecules. There was a certain learning curve. There was a certain hump which we had to all overcome. What kind of process equipment is required, for example? What kind of processes are required? I mean, biological processes are so much more complex to small molecule processes. There was a learning curve within the industry, within the regulators, and within the suppliers. And I think we always should consider all three. A table or chair has to have three legs at least to stand on. So I think we have the same situation and scenario right now in the cell and gene therapy part, where we have experienced industry people which actually are hired into these companies, where the regulators are also, they have a certain experience with it, and we see the tremendous amount of new drug, or INDs as well as new drug applications within that area. So there's an overwhelming aspect towards the regulators. And then again, the suppliers play a role also. All of us have to learn how we can bring this all again into an optimal scenario as we did with biologics. And from a standpoint, from a GCON standpoint, from a facility standpoint, what we realized is we cannot think traditional any longer. We need to think outside the box to serve that particular application with the containment aspect of clean rooms, the mobility aspect of clean rooms, the scalability aspect and flexibility aspect of clean rooms. And to that degree, we had our own learning curve, and we fulfill now these requirements, but we don't want to stop there. We have to do the same thing. What we need to do now from our side, from a GCON approach, is go to the regulators, talk with the regulators, what's out there, new technology, and talk to the industry, what's new in technology, and listen also to the industry, what's required, what's needed. And I think we had this recently at the PDA annual meeting where we talked about new facilities, new entities, speed, time to market, how can we actually be much more rapid with our response. And in there, we also discussed that we cannot just talk about all the time about the regulatory aspects. We have to talk also about what is required from a supplier standpoint, because there are new technology needs out there for specifically these therapies. I mean, real-time release, for example, is just one topic. The clean room infrastructure is another topic.
So based on that, one of the mantras for years has always been faster time to market time. So I assume. So what are they doing? I mean, considering that we're learning as we go, but how do they accelerate market entry?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, the traditional way of designing a facility was, sitting down with a blank sheet of paper. What we're doing is we're designing things in advance of having a customer. So we're trying to solve the problem before a customer even comes to us, which takes some investment, but your customer's investing as well. So at the end of the day, that helps with that time to market issue because you're coming to the table with, an 80% design solution as opposed to starting from day one. Now, we have customers that there's a varying degree of success on that, but by and large, I think they recognize that we've worked through a lot of the problems, and their end solution may not look like what we brought, but we know the problems, and that we've solved them, and we can apply those same solutions to their facility design.
And and I think this is a really good point. Ultimately, you look at what we did in the past, we always invented the wheel over and over again. Instead of like saying, what can we take out of the designs which we created for the industry? What did we learn from these designs? And then create turnkey solutions which we also can clone. We don't necessarily need to do all the time a new clean room infrastructure. Why don't we just clone and multiply it? And with that, and I know it sounds a bit far-fetched, but we believe there's a mass production market out there for clean room infrastructure. So why can't we produce a clean room in a mass production like a car? A car is by far more complex than a clean room, and take this mass production, standardize it, and bring it into a standardized platform for different applications. Cell and gene therapy is one, and it's actually ideal because it's, again, a smaller footprint, a smaller volume, and it requires a robust containment. It's not like a large-scale facility. So what we are working on with IPS is on turnkey facilities. We are building and planning more turnkey facilities to have at least a catalog ready for the end user to look into that turnkey facility and either tweak it or take it off the shelf. And that's one part. The other part is we need to react fast to the needs. I mean, right now what we see is a tremendous demand on clinical material. So yes, the target showed promise. Now we need clinical material. Everybody's scrambling for capacity. Typically what we find is that the CMOs do not have that capacity any longer, or not even the knowledge to run your product, so you create your own facility. And with the infrastructures which we design and create, and which we designed and created with IPS, we can build these systems in 6 to 8 months. So there's a possibility nowadays where we can be much faster to create a qualified platform.
So what are some of the benefits of that facility design?
The benefit for us, what we see is when you, for example, talk about a clinical side, typically what happens is what we see from our client base, a warehouse building, a butler type building is leased. You create your clean room infrastructure within that building, and then you run your clinical material within that building, but at least it's not your end point. Your end point is commercial side. So typically what happens is when you run through your clinical material, you don't have anything else in the pipeline. This is it. This is a sunk asset. With mobile clean room or prefabricated clean room systems, you can actually take them out of that building, bring them to the end side. That's one part. The other part is that pre-qualification. We virtually pressure test the clean room infrastructure off-site without interrupting your processes. So we know when it comes into your building, it's working, it's running. Any glitch will be rectified within that off-site building. That's the second benefit. The third benefit which we saw is the robustness in delivery and price. So when you have a cost, right? Somebody comes to you and says, well, it's a cost per square foot of $500. If you ask anybody here whether the $500 were ever held, the answer is no. So cost robustness we see as a major demand, and then delivery robustness. So when you say, I want to have that in 8 months, it has to be there in 8 months. So we had a scenario, for example, where we didn't get the raw material supplied to us, and we had a delay of 3 weeks. So Now, typically, when you get that delay of 3 weeks on site, it is a delay of 3 weeks, and that's it. You cannot catch up with it. With offsite, we can actually create other shifts, overtime, or work at weekends, and we compensate it for the 3 weeks. So the delivery robustness is also there. So there's a multitude of benefits which we see on the offsite side. I don't say it's a silver bullet, but it's a great tool in the toolbox to have.
Well, what's the uptake on something?
Sorry?
Something like the uptake, it sounds like a lot of people are adopting that concept.
Yes. So we, from our standpoint, from GCOM, we had to actually double our manufacturing side right now. So we have the manufacturing capacity in place. We're building another manufacturing building right now, and we actually have now also a manufacturing site in Kilkenny, Ireland, because we see the uptick in Europe also. And the next step would be Asia.
One of the things that came through loud and clear this morning was risk management, obviously, right? I mean, we heard it. The guy was here on the intelligent supply chain. We heard it from a facility design, and I asked the question again. So to me, I'll ask the question again. So Tom, our company, I mean, are we dealing with the quality? Are we dealing with putting the compliance at risk? I mean, there's a lot here. I mean, we got a real situation. I mean, how are they dealing with it?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's not applying the proper principles on purpose. I don't think there's anything deliberate going there, but there's just so many products coming to market, and it's so critical from a patient perspective that, I'm sure things happen. That jump from lab to commercial is a big jump, especially if you come in from academia, which a lot of this is coming from that sector. So again, I think people are looking for the right resources. They're looking for qualified engineers and PhDs, and they're having trouble finding them. And there is no answer right now. I think everybody's reaching to all parts of the globe to find resources, and we're building them, is what we're doing.
So between GCON and IP, I mean, what are the hurdles of getting people into an industrialized commercial? Here's the guy in a lab. Here's a hospital-based kind of situation. So, let's get the rubber on the road. So, what do you do? I mean, from your standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, the first couple approved products are all using a scale-out methodology. So they're doing what they did for 10 patients. They're doing for 100 patients. They're doing it for 1,000 patients, and that's not a commercial. That's not an industrial process. We are working, again, in advance of having a customer. We're trying to work on that solution so that, when product 3, 4, 5, 6 is coming out, we've got the equipment. This is not just a facility thing, it's an equipment thing. So we're trying to work in advance to put all that together for them so they're ready. But I think one thing, if you're at an operating company, you're so focused on launching your GMP operation that you're scared to death of process improvement. You've got maybe an approved drug and you don't want to mess with it because it's got approvals. You have to set up a pilot plan or something aside from it to deal with the process improvement. And I think as an industry, we need a better FDA approval process for process improvement.
Yeah, and then the other part, what I enjoy, super enjoy, and our team enjoys, is you work in a partnership. So what we found with the projects which we executed is it's a true partnership, because in one way or the other, the therapies were unique or are unique, and in one way or the other also prefabricated cleanroom systems are unique, but working together in a partnership with a client to work on the process, to work on the cleanroom design, to work as a team. Every time we executed a project, it was a partnership. It's not a transactional sales. It's a true partnership. And I find that really good because what we do is we learn from each other when we execute these projects. And again, same to the point of risk assessment, risk management, absolutely important to do so and minimize the risk. But with that, we have to be very, very open to each other on all parts. And on the process design, as well as in the clean room infrastructure design, on delivery times, on anything what could go wrong, we need to assess, we need to avoid, and we need to learn from previous infrastructures and jobs which we did. So what we typically do when we execute a project, we have a very open lessons learned session where we actually then learn from each other where we can improve, because we know it will not be just one project, it will be a lifetime type of project where we work together with that client.
So, so GCOM works with process equipment guys to get the job done. So it's multifaceted.
Yeah, it's so for example, with the Uber Self-Flex system, which we created with IPS, it's for us the entire facility with our pod infrastructure within that facility. And it's up to the client what process equipment the client wants to bring into that facility. But we also were approached, as you saw recently, we announced a collaboration together with GE, where we actually work together with GE to introduce their process equipment into a clean room environment, because we see also from a process equipment supplier, they are not only want to give the solution as, here's the process equipment, find now the right environment around it. They actually came to us and said, well, we would like to have an environment around our process equipment. So we can bundle this now, the GE platform with IPS and us together, to create that platform or predefined platform, and then the customer can tweak, can configure that kind of predefined platform. For us, what we want to do is we want to give you a solid, robust piece of information, a platform you can work from, and then you can say, well, I want to have a different airlock, I want to have different process equipment. You have that flexibility to configure these type of platforms.
Tom, let me ask you, one of the things that comes to play all the time is where you put the facility. I trying to jump, we keep worrying about the environment, but the environment can be compromised by where you build the facility, right?
It can, so I think geography does play a role. There are hubs developing for cell and gene therapy, and they're easy to point out, right? But they're expensive places to build. And so, we're seeing companies coming out of, more affordable areas where staff is easier to get and existing assets maybe already exist. But I do think geography does play a role. Specialized trades, will have trouble, migrating towards, more rural areas or not hubs. And I think offsite construction has a solution there.
Right.
When you can do things in a home base where you have skilled labor, and then ship it to a more affordable location, that's a great solution. I think that we're not the only industry adopting that, so it's clear that it's something that we can all benefit from.
I've asked myself the question many times, why would you put the plant here? I'm not really following the logic on that one. But there got to be new technologies that evaluate, that improve the environment, the clean room, that account for that give more flexibility. Is that kind of where we're at?
So there's always constant improvement. I joined the company in 2012. Since then, we actually improved our product all the time. And the reason why we see improvement possibilities and opportunities is because of our clients. So we learn together with our clients where we say, well, we can tweak this, and then we have our own design and research engineers which actually look at certain aspects of our product which we can again improve. The one part, for example, and last year we were sitting here with Katie from LifeAir, and we had this discussion about like volatiles in air. What type of influence have volatiles in air? And I never thought about that. I'm not an expert in that, but they have an influence on the cell viability as well as cell growth. So now you look into that, these type of volatiles, what can we do to put actually a scrubber, for example, into a clean room infrastructure to avoid volatiles? Recently, I've been approached by another company. They do dry hydrogen peroxide. So again, we look into these different possibilities and options which are out there, which we might be able to integrate into our product to create either another facet as an option for the pod structure or to improve the pod structure.
Well, me, so one of the things when we work with some of our clients, what I found was if it requires a flexible solution, and I'm dealing with a very integrated, highly structured organization that spent years establishing how they do business. I mean, and they're always looking to get to market within 2 years. I mean, is that real? I mean, if all of a sudden, a huge global multinational says, hey, that's what I want to do, I mean.
Yeah, so I think we get customers who come to us specifically to achieve that goal. 2 years is a very short time frame for a traditional large company to get a capital project completed from the ground up. But it is doable. But often, we're trying to innovate, right? We're trying to do things different in an industry that has been kind of pretty consistent for many years. And I think customers come with the idea that they want to innovate, but only under the constraints that, the thousands of SOPs that they have in their system can be followed, and that's going to be a tall order.
I agree. I mean, hey, we're all working for a conservative industry. It always takes a while to adopt new technologies, and in some instances, the regulators actually pushed forward as a reason for why we don't adopt new technology faster, right? So potato chip companies are in instances much more efficient than our industry. And the reason is because the adoption of new technology into our industry takes time. But what we though see right now is we see that wave of adoption. So we see that the established companies are looking into that, into the new infrastructures, and the main reason for that is, again, to what I said before, the robustness of delivery time and the robustness of cost. And the reason is when you want to improve or when you want to ramp up your capacity, when you do prediction and planning of what's required, you want to have a very robust timeline. A very good example was recently the announcement that Biogen's drug failed. And the site is built, $1.1 billion are put into a site. So, that's a large site. It's very difficult to plan in that regard. And to Tom's point, it takes, more than 2 years to plan for that. But what we need to do and where we need to get to is where we can abbreviate these type of timelines, that we don't have this kind of like late stage failure of a product and we have capital investment sunk into a site. So I think everybody realizes that we need to change our mindset when it comes to facility builds, facility speed, or the speed of build, as well as a late stage investment. To invest at a later, withhold the investment, and then bring the investment in, and then rapidly build a site. So we need to be faster within the facilities. And I think that can be accomplished by a multitude of aspects like design, if we have standardized design systems, off-site build, and again, execution experience.
Well, I mean, our industry is famous for holding on to the buck until you get the late phase. I mean, that's just the mentality we deal with. But, I mean, let's face it, that's conventionally the way it's looked at. But we're talking about a whole new vision here. We're talking about a whole new approach. I mean, so how fast do you think this implementation of off-site and all, the things we've been discussing, I mean, how fast is this going to take? I mean...
well, it's done already. I mean, it's like I have to say that, like, the adoption rate is incredibly encouraging. So much that we actually had to double our manufacturing site. So yes, the adoption is rapidly happening, specifically in the new therapy applications. Because, just an example, we got approached by a company in November, beginning of November. We got the order in December, we will deliver in June. So that's fast. That's rapid when it comes to building a facility, building a site. So now when people realize how fast you can be with an offsite model, the adoption will happen also much more rapid instead of sticking with the traditional build, which will take you much longer because you build parallel and you don't have the speed as you have on an offsite build.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we also heard getting to that is that, I mean, it gets to the point where people don't even know what it is they need. I mean, when you ask them for a URS and so, I mean, it's like, what? So, well, to step back, I mean, to me, the point here is, you know, and then on the other hand, we talk about automation. So I'm a little perplexed, but let's stick with let's assume that this adoption, the uptake, and all that we're talking about it. So let's talk specifically about automation. I mean, is that going to make it any better? I mean, is automation going to be an uptake? Is it going to be an opportunity in cell and gene therapy, or is it just is it just icing on the cake, or is it real, or what?
No. I mean, so number one, on the URS side, you are absolutely right. We had to realize that when you ask for a URS from the client, you get a traditional URS, and it's very difficult for the client to realize, so what do I really need to define in my URS when I really don't know that new off-site product? So we create URS templates, we create FAT, SAT templates, IQ, OQ templates for our clients. So that's a helpful tool. That's to the part of the URS and documentation, qualification documentation. The other part is automation. I believe we will see much more uptick in automation. It's needed on the cell and gene therapy side as well as on the continuous bioprocess side. And we are flying with wooden wings right now. I think the automation part is a key element when it comes to infrastructure. So our vision is that in future, when we again work together with our clients, work together with equipment manufacturers, that we require to create a smart pod where the clean room is not any longer like a dumb box. It's actually a smart interface to anything from that clean room infrastructure to the process equipment, is an interface from the chain of custody. So you get your patient sample come in, you need to log that down. What do you do with that sample when it gets out? So the needle-to-needle logistics plays a large role. And then the other part is also from a clean room, the environmental monitoring aspect, as well as running the process equipment and the pod itself. So we need to, it's an interface, and it goes also into the building management system as an interface between the process and the building.
Well, Mike, I know, getting back to that comment you made about when Katie was here and we were talking about life there and the environment and stuff. I mean, from a regulatory standpoint, I mean, we were saying some stuff like, well, we're actually protecting ourselves from VOCs or whatever. There's not even a limit on this stuff. So I mean, like, so I'm designing this new facility. I mean, what are you hearing from the regulators? What's the regulatory input on stuff like this?
Well, so I mean, the regulators itself, Tom's company as well as our company, we are interfacing, or we are talking with the regulators all the time. We're actually training regulators on processes and clean room infrastructures. And why we do that is we actually introduce them to new technologies. So why do we want to introduce the regulators to new technologies? Because you don't want to have a regulator come to your side being surprised what they see. So when you have an educated regulator, an informed regulator, it is a major advantage. We don't want to have surprises, number one. Number two, the regulators change their attitude. I mean, it's incredible how much more feedback we get from regulators, how much the regulators want to know about new technologies, because they realize that therapies are changing. We are seeing a new era of therapies coming. As I said, we had the example with the biologics moving from small molecules to large molecules. We're going now into a new therapy area, and the regulators know it. And they want to interact. They want to be part of that three-legged table, right? So I think and then besides that, I see the humongous pull on the filings. So they require to actually adopt rapidly also with us. I think it's a great opportunity for us as industry, as supplier and regulators to work together to find the right ground to fulfill these therapies.
I agree. I mean, we'll be talking about collaborative efforts in the next session up on continuous. But one of the things that the most successful, I think, is always when there's a collaboration, and that is either regulators and industry, regulators and academia. The point being, I don't know about the rest of you. I don't like sitting across from an investigator that doesn't know about what I'm doing or doesn't know my technology. A question asked in ignorance is usually the end of the interview. That's catastrophic. So I agree fully. I think but collaboration is key. What's your take on that, Tommy?
It's interesting. I think the idea of a cure instead of just a treatment is having a profound impact on that collaboration. I was sitting with a customer this past week who was going to release a batch, which is a patient, and because it's a cure and because of the criticality of what they were doing, they had a deviation, and they said I had to call the FDA to see if I could release this batch. I've never heard that before. So the fact that there's somebody on the other end of the phone is an interesting thing. I just have never heard that before.
That's a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new one to me also.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. They usually aren't on the signature chain, but okay.
I agree. I agree.
All right. So let me. One of the other things I think we've talked a lot about getting cell gene therapy. Let me ask you this though. I mean, one of the things we get into when we get the zeal to come up with a new technology, we start to forget about stuff. That's how LEEDs came about. That's how green design came about. That's how sustainable. I mean, we haven't lost sight of that stuff in our zealousness to come up with a new facility design. I mean, what's your take on that, Tom? Just stepping back a bit on that.
Yeah, I think as we, over the next 10 years, we're going to find other pressures.
Yeah.
So we're very inward focused. We're very focused on what's happening inside the environment. But there's a lot of things happening on the outside. Pressures, climate change, Internet of Things. There's a lot of things happening. So, I, for one, think we've been relying on air change-based design for too long. And we have the technology now to do online monitoring, and we really should be pivoting towards that technology rather than just saying, we need 50 air changes for a grade B environment. Maybe there's a point in the next 10 years where we're varying the airflow based on online monitoring instead. And I think that will take us to a whole new era of energy reduction and really green thinking, which is, again, is a huge disruption that's coming very soon.
So while we're on this, so what do you think is going to be the main disruptive factor in the next 10 years to the industry? Is that? What do you think?
I think business continuity is the big disruption. There's going to be regulations that dictate where we get our energy from, how people move from place to place. We're seeing migration becoming a big part of our world, and I think business continuity with respect to all of that is going to be the challenge.
Okay.
So we now have therapy that is a cure. So hospitals right now, they have mandatory essential employees who have to live and work within so many miles of the hospital. We're now working on cures, so I think our industry is going to adopt that same mantra of, if someone doesn't show up, someone doesn't get cured. So I think we're going to start to see a business continuity issue around having people co-located with the manufacturing plants.
This is an interesting topic that was addressed at Augmented Reality and Virtual Reality. We had spoken to a fellow from Apprentice earlier last week on an interview, and one of the things was the co-location's an issue, but if enabled with the technology that the person who is the expert has somebody in the plant to be his eyes with the AR, that's a solution. We're talking about fixing a facility on the other side of the planet while your expert's sitting in East Hanover, New Jersey. I mean, so to me, that's, you got to bring all of this into one spot. So, trying to wrap this around because I think there's going to be a few questions. All right, number one recommendation you have for a company looking to design a cell therapy facility. All right, you're up first, Mike.
Come to us.
How did I know that was going to be the answer?
Yes, sorry. I mean, you gave me this one. I think number one is it's a partnership. Number one, look at standardized designs, and within that partnership, tweak that standardized design. Don't try to reinvent the wheel over and over again. Really go and utilize what's out there as a standard design. You're much more robust and faster with it.
Tom?
Yeah, I think I would say pick a team that knows the regulatory landscape and proceed. The time is of the essence with these therapies and getting into the market quickly. So we tend to get paralyzed in this RFP phase, and the business is just too busy. So I think when you find a team that's, you got good chemistry with and they're a proven entity, then you just got to go.
Yeah, you got to move it along.
Same with equipment.
Yeah. Faster time to market's only as fast as the slowest guy on your team. Believe that. Okay, there is just for everybody's edification, there is on continuous manufacturing coming up, but our next CAR-T cell advancement will be, the discussion will be tomorrow, and that's when we're going to be talking about these environmental challenges and the things that we've discussed today, and in addition to the modularity. I want to thank our speakers. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Right.
Pharmaceutical Processing, in conjunction with INTERPHEX, presents INTERPHEX Live.